Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great day so far and welcome to today's video, which is going to be a mashup, a mixture between a get ready with me for my anniversary lunch slash an unhinged story with Charlotte. I've been holding on to this unhinged story. It's been a while since we did one. I've been holding on to this one because it's a bit embarrassing, but I thought today's the day. It's a bit boring for me to just do my makeup and just randomly chatter on to you guys. I needed a theme. I needed something a bit juicy. So we've got a juicy story, an unhinged Charlotte story, and I'm going to be getting ready for my anniversary lunch date with my husband. I'm going to be showing you hair, body, face, I think that's it, as I prepare myself for my 12th anniversary lunch with my husband. So without further ado, let's get started. So I did my hair yesterday. I used my Dyson Airwrap yesterday. If you want to see what it looks like fresh out the gate, like immediately after an air wrapping has been taken to it, then watch my Dior Riviera review. That was it freshly done, and I got a lot of compliments, so thank you so much. That was the Dyson Airwrap at work. That was yesterday, and then last night I just slept with it in a scrunchie, and it will be nice and good to go and still sort of bouffant like, but a little less wavy, just more body, which I really like. That's why I did the air wrap yesterday. So I'm going to do my brows on camera, which is a rarity these days because it's so flipping hard to do your brows on camera. It's literally my most hated thing. So I thought, given today, it's not actually my anniversary today, it's in 2 days my anniversary, but unfortunately my daughter's birthday is the day before our anniversary, which you would say like bad planning, but she was like a week late, so how could I have known, you know? And my son's birthday is the day before Valentine's Day, so there's just no romanticism in this house whatsoever. So because our anniversary is actually on a Sunday and we don't really have anyone to babysit for us for a dinner, so we decided we're going to go for a lunch date instead, which I really like the idea of, because we don't have to worry about the children, we don't have to worry about getting home for a certain time other than the school run, which should be fine, and it's just a bit more easygoing. So yeah, we're going to go to our favourite restaurant, but we're going to go for lunch instead of dinner. So dress wise, I can't help you. I can tell you that this is the perfect dress for this occasion. I was going through my whole wardrobe and it's a bit of a tricky pick, you know, because it's a really nice restaurant, which normally when we go to, I would like dress up to the absolute nines, to the peak of what I've got to offer. But in the daytime, it's a little more relaxed, and also I have to walk around Bath however I'm dressed at lunchtime on a Friday, and 2, I have to go on the school run with what I'm wearing for this lunch because we'll be going straight to the school run from lunch. So there was a lot to take into account. It's also a really nice warm sunny day, so nothing, you know, too warm or anything like that. So there was a lot to take on board, and this is like the perfect, nice, I feel like, dressed like appropriately for a nice occasion, but I also feel a bit more casual because this is like midi and just, it's not a sort of, I don't know, a fancier material. It's a bit more a casual material, and I think the twists make it a bit more casual, like off shoulder, so it's perfect. However, it's like 5 years old. I've taken the label out and I have no idea where it's from. I think it might have been an ASOS special, but don't quote me on that, and wherever it was from, it's not there anymore, so I'm so sorry about it. So as it's our anniversary coming up, I thought I would take this opportunity to tell you a story, to take you back in time and to tell you a funny story about when we first met, kind of. Turns out I in fact can't do my brows on camera, so sorry about that false advertising. So I'm going to take you back now. I'm going to take you back. What year was it? I don't know. Was it 2010? So picture this. It's 2010, okay? I was still working at the English Institute of Sport, and I was a few months post-divorce. I was maybe not ready to mingle necessarily, But at this point I was definitely, you know, feeling a bit more like myself, adjusting to single life, not ready to start dating or anything like that, when at my desk I was sat minding my own business and in walked my husband, Danny. Now, we had met before, like briefly, but Danny, at the time we met, he was working with the British skeleton team. He was their head of performance. So he had been 2010, is this right? Let me just check my years. Was there a Winter Olympics in 2010? So we had briefly met before that day. However, I obviously was married when we had met, and it had been literally, he might have walked in the office, said hello, introduced himself, that was about it. And then I think I saw him but didn't really speak to him at the Christmas party, like the 2009 Christmas party. But again, you know, I thought I was happily married. Obviously now I know that my ex-husband was having an affair during that Christmas party. I wish I had known at the time, but I didn't. So, you know, there was no like attraction, there was no conversation. We weren't even friends. We had literally maybe just said hello, and that was about as well as we knew each other, because at the time Danny was working with the British skeleton team. He was the head of performance, and it was obviously the 2010 Winter Olympics. So in those days he was on the winter sports circuit for months at a time. So he wasn't someone I had like formed a friendship with or anything like that. He was basically a stranger. I just hadn't, which thank goodness, because I feel like if we had got to know each other while I was married to my ex, we would have like friend zoned each other, you know, and then that probably, I don't know if anything would have ever happened. But because we hadn't really met, because he had been traveling with the skeleton team the whole winter season while my divorce and everything went down, when he actually came back into the office on a regular basis, it was more so like April after the games had finished, and he had had his like holiday and his break after the games. And I was, you know, sort of ready to move on at that point. So I remember vividly, we both joke about this because we both obviously remember this moment from different perspectives. So he walks in, I remember him walking in and being like, wait a minute. Because although I had seen him before, I hadn't seen him, you know, when I'm in a relationship, I'm not looking around noticing other men at all. I am fully committed, and that's that. I don't, you know, hanker after other men or even notice other men. So I just had never really noticed him. But obviously this was single Charlotte sat at her desk, minding her own business. And he walked in and he just sort of said hi. And I was like, hello, but really cool, you know, in a cool way. He says he walked in and thought, who is that? I think he maybe either didn't remember me or I'd had a bit of a post-divorce glow up. And again, you know, we'd barely seen each other before this. So he sort of says he claims that he walked straight out of that office after we'd said hello and went to his friend who ended up being our best man at our wedding and said, who is that girl in the office? And he had sort of not necessarily warned him off of me, but he had said, you know, she's literally just got divorced, mate, leave her alone. Was something along the lines of the advice he was given, but he did not take this advice. Thank goodness. So we started just talking and we started a friendship initially, and this was the perfect thing for both of us because he at this point had been single for 7 years. Okay, this is what sport is like. So he had, I think, sort of dated people and things, but he hadn't had a girlfriend. He had been single for 7 years because he had been, you know, on the winter circuit. Imagine trying to start a relationship like that, where you're out of the country back and forth, you're in the middle of nowhere in the snow for half of the year. It's just, you know, it's very hard, obviously, to start a relationship. And so he had been living the single life for a very long time. And strictly speaking, you're not really supposed to fraternize with your co-workers in sport. It's really, really not necessarily banned, but it's certainly frowned upon and something you shouldn't be doing. It's just not really advisable. So he was very wary of that, being, you know, super professional and everything. And I, of course, was super wary of men in general, given the experience I had just had. So we started off just really just talking and building a friendship. We never really spent time just the two of us. It was always like in a group, you know, drinks after work. And sometimes we'd text, but it was all very much building a friendship for a long time, like a good couple of months, I'd say, before we both were sort of ready to say, okay, this might be worth it. I think he obviously did not want to just have a fling or just date someone casually that then went wrong and caused awkwardness or got him in trouble in the office if it wasn't going to actually be worth, you know, the trouble. And for me, I was obviously very wary of men and scared. And I also just felt like it was so handsome. He is absolutely gorgeous. And to look at him, you would very much think that man is, you know, the wrong person to be trying to heal your heart. He just looks like he's going to get you really in trouble. So that scared me. I was also convinced, because he'd been single for so long, that he must be like an F-boy, you know? That's what I had decided, and I just didn't trust him as far as I could throw him. I mean, I wouldn't have trusted anyone at this moment, let's be honest, that wasn't personal. But the math wasn't mathing. This ridiculously handsome man with, you know, with this really exciting, cool job, he's in sport, there are women everywhere. Why would he not have a girlfriend? So we just took months getting to know each other and just, you know, built that friendship and built that foundation really, really slowly, which was perfect for both of us. And, you know, when it came time to sort of break the news to our bosses, it felt like, you know, we could really say we're in a relationship as opposed to we're just fooling around, you know. So that went down a little better, I think, than it would have done otherwise. We both got to keep our jobs. So at this time, my husband was living his best bachelor life. My boyfriend at the time, was living his best bachelor life in a terrace house in a little village just outside of Bath. So he lived in this sort of, there was like 6 houses, like a terrace of 6 houses. And all of their gardens like sort of joined up. And this was like almost like a little family of people. So he lived in one of these terraces. There was an older couple who lived in one. There was a couple of other single lads, and then there was a single girl who lived all in these terraces. Here's where the story gets slightly awkward, and it's not the best look for my husband, okay? Definitely mistakes were made, and we're going to talk about all. So before I came along, the girl who lived next door to my husband, let's call her Claire. So before I came along, my husband, you know, this sort of group of houses, this terrace of houses, they used to have quite a social time. They'd have parties, they'd all hang out in the garden together, you know, they'd have drinks once a week, things like that. They were like a little family, this little group of houses. It was very sweet, you know, they'd spend a lot of time in each other's houses, hanging out, and it was like a little sort of party row of houses, a very, you know, eclectic group of people, but they just formed this really nice like neighbourly relationship where they'd help each other out, they'd look after each other's dogs when they were away in each other's houses, and obviously Danny was away a lot, so they would like mow his lawn and things like that. It was just really cute. So the single girl I mentioned earlier, let's call her Claire. Before I came along, it turns out that she had quite the crush on Danny, okay? So she had, you know, she'd been carrying a torch for him for a little while, that he, being a man and also being my husband, he's oblivious. He had zero idea this was a thing, okay? Even though it was probably very, very obvious. Bear in mind, he also at this time was, you know, in his like early 20s, single on the sporting circuit. And that was like his whole life. So, you know, he was just a young, silly boy, like so many of them. So one night at one of these parties, again, reminder, before I came along, before we had even met, they had had like a drunken snog, okay? They had a drunken kiss, a drunken snog, a one-off. Obviously for Claire, now we know that she had had this thing for Danny for a long time. It was like, oh my gosh, it's finally happened. We're finally going to be together. Danny obviously being completely oblivious that this was a thing. To him, it was just like, whoops, that was a terrible idea. How silly, lol. So they had different, you know, feelings about what had gone down there. Apparently she sort of like the next day thought that this kiss was like the beginning of them, you know, being in love and living happily ever after. And he sort of realised, I've messed up. This was a terrible idea. I've pooped where I sleep, where I live. And we all know what happens when you do that. So Claire thought her and Danny were going to be in a relationship. And he had to then obviously tell her, no, we aren't going to be. And like the most cliched classic man mistake you can possibly make, he uttered the infamous words, I'm just not ready for a relationship right now. I'm not looking for a relationship right now, which, to be honest, was probably true. I'd say when he met me, he didn't really think a relationship was a good idea. He was traveling all of the time. He was away so often. But the problem is, men, they tell us these things. They say things like, you know, I'm just not looking for a relationship right now. I'm just not ready for a relationship right now. And what they mean is, I don't want a relationship with you ever. But they think they're being kind to us and softening the blow by just saying, oh, it's not you. I just don't want a relationship with anyone at this moment. But a lot of the time when we're young and we haven't learnt this lesson, done this dance, we will take that literally. We hear, I don't want a relationship right now. And we think, that's fine. Give it 6 months, give it a few months, and he will. So while Danny went about his business thinking he'd done a great job of resolving this issue he'd created with this silly drunken snog, he actually had created a much bigger problem that was going to haunt him later on. So about 6 months later, I think this was like before the season started, and he was, you know, then off traveling and hadn't really seen this girl for a long time. Then he got back, met me, we started seeing each other, and then, you know, became boyfriend girlfriend. And unbeknownst to him, Claire had literally thought this entire time that she was like waiting for him, that he was, you know, they had this sort of arrangement in her mind that once he was ready for a relationship, he was like going to come and get her. And that's what she thought was happening. She took it very literally when he said, I'm just not ready for a relationship right now. She literally thought, see you in a few months and that's when we'll start this relationship. We all know better than that now, don't we? We've all heard this from a man. And we talked about how this was not ideal. And what he should have said is, I don't want a relationship with you. I'd rather we were just friends. I'm so sorry. I should not have drunkenly kissed you, but I didn't know you were in love with me. Something a bit more clear. But like I said, he was like, I don't know, 25 at this time and just not very good at talking to women and being honest with us. And I just think so many of them do that, don't they? He still will adopt this same misguided sense of morality with me sometimes. When my children were a little more like fresh out of the womb, he would still have to travel and go away, but it was like a nightmare because he was leaving me with newborn babies and toddlers. And so instead of like telling me as soon as he knew he was going to have to go away, he'd leave it because he was like scared to tell me. And then he'd tell me like, I'm going away next week. As if that was going to make it better. And I was talking to my friends, because obviously a lot of our friends also work in sport, and they all do this. All of these men who have to tell their wives that they're traveling or they've got this competition they have to go to, or they're going to go away for a week, they put it off because they know it's bad news, and then tell us like later than they needed to because they know it's not, you know, a good thing for us to hear. And then it actually makes it 10 times worse because we haven't had enough time to prepare and get used to the idea. It's a false logic, and I feel like a lot of men, especially men in their 20s, they operate with these false economies a lot of their time, and it always comes back to bite them. So to be clear, where we are is that, you know, sort of a good few months ago, they had had this drunken snog, and then Danny had tried to get out of jail free by telling her that he wasn't ready for a relationship right now. You know, he's traveling too much. It's not you. I'm just not ready for a relationship right now. I'm too busy. She had taken this literally, and she thought that he was going to sort of let her know when he was ready, and she was just there waiting for him. What a pickle. So imagine her surprise when we are like walking into his house hand in hand, and she sort of comes out her front door. Now he literally has no idea that he's done anything wrong, because he still thinks in his mind he told her that, you know, there wasn't going to be anything and they were just friends. And that's what he'd thought was happening this whole time. They'd maintained their friendship. They'd just gone back to being neighbours, like friendly neighbours. That's his version of events. She walked out her front door, saw me and him walking up hand in hand, and he obviously was just like, "Hi, Claire." And she was aghast. I didn't think anything of it, because she obviously hid it really well. Like, she didn't sort of try to kill me or anything, and she didn't cry, she didn't run away. She just had a sort of casual, "Hi, how are you?" Danny said, "Oh, this is Charlotte." And I think they maybe talked about her dog that was running around in the gardens. I don't know, that was that. Cut to, we're sat on the sofa, like, I don't know, an hour later, and he gets this text message like, "Who the hell is that? What is going on?" And he's like, "What?" He had no idea what was happening, and she was like demanding he explain himself, and he did not know why or what was happening. And obviously I'm still very much in my suspicious phase of life. I'm still only, you know, a few months into this friendship become dating situation, still don't trust this man or any man as far as I can throw them. And now suddenly this next door neighbour is talking about who is she. So yeah, this did not go down very well with me. So I was like demanding like an explanation. So he told me this story, and I don't know that I necessarily believed the full version of events straight away. But what happened next became quite convincing. So she was messaging him all this, like, she kicked off, okay? She was furious. I'm just going to put it that way. She was effing and blinding over the text. She was very, very angry. And she was saying, "I've been waiting for you for months to be ready, and now you're just with somebody else." And that's where we had the conversation about, "Oh, you shouldn't have said that. We believe you when you say that. You should have just said, I just want to be friends. You know, I don't see that way. I don't feel that way about you. And this wouldn't be happening right now." So he dealt with it at that time very well. He was very apologetic. Like, he put his hands up. I mean, we had a conversation about women and things you should and shouldn't tell us, and why he could have been a bit more transparent. And obviously he was showing me, you know, the messages, just to reassure me that, you know, his version of events was true, and this wasn't like he had cheated on her with me. He fully never knew that there was a relationship there, or that there ever was an expectation of one. He had just been a bit thick, as per the man code. So that was alarming. And then at one point she put a letter through his door while we were sat on the sofa, which was again just this ranting, raging letter of how like much of a bleep and bleep and bleep he was. She never really said anything mean about me. I will give her her dues. She sort of, you know, she was blaming the person who was responsible. Obviously, it was nothing to do with me. She probably hated my guts, sure. But she didn't take it out on me, to be fair to her. So that, you know, props for girl code. But she put this letter through his door, basically raging about how now she has to move house and she can't live there anymore, and that he's like basically ruined her life. So that was an awkward little number, because we would come in and out of the house, and, you know, sometimes she'd be like walking in or vice versa. And so it was always very uncomfortable. And another time they used to have this sort of parking area where you had to park like behind each other. And we had just parked and we were getting shopping out of the boot, and she was pulling up like right behind us. And I had turned around and seen her like driving her car right towards us, and maybe for a split second thought she might kill me. She might be about to mow me down. So I just like froze and stood like looking at the car thinking, is she going to stop? Is this the end of my days? And I think, again, from her perspective, she probably thought this bee is standing there like staring me down. But actually, I just wasn't sure if this was my last moments on this planet. So it was very awkward and uncomfortable for a little time. Obviously, this girl had fully had her heart broken by my boyfriend, my now husband, and she was furious and she was very upset, and fair enough, I do understand it. Well, I think we've all been there when a boy or a man has told us, I don't want a relationship right now. Usually it happens in school. That happened to me a lot in school. You know, I had a boy who would tell me like every day he doesn't want to be in a relationship with me, but then he wouldn't let me get into a relationship with anyone else. Anytime I tried to make a new boyfriend, he would like suck me back in. So it was one of those where he didn't want me, but he didn't want anyone else to have me. I feel like we've all had those, and we all get told, I'm just not ready for a relationship, and then they start one with someone else. I think that's happened to every single one of us, and we just learn over the years that that is boy code for I just don't want a relationship with you specifically. So that was kind of the end of it. Not long after all of the letters and the text messages and the awkward run-ins. By the way, I'm going to use this new palette from Hourglass. I've had this for a couple of weeks now and I haven't yet used it because I've just been so busy. There's been so many new releases and I've been on my Easter holiday, so I haven't had a chance to review this or even use it yet. So I can only apologise. But I guess a good few weeks after all of this went down, she actually moved out. I think she was renting, so it wasn't that big of a, you know, she didn't have to sell her house or anything, whereas Danny owned his house. So I think she was renting, so it's quite easy for her to like just move out and find somewhere else. And I literally felt so bad and so horrible because at this point he was almost living at my house and he ended up moving in there and selling that house. So she really could have stayed where she was, but she obviously didn't want to. It was just too awkward and uncomfortable for her, and fair enough. So like I said, that all went down, I'd say like 2010, towards the end. Now I had my daughter in 2014, so Aoife was born in April 2014, and immediately we started baby swimming lessons. I, you know, of course, was a swimmer in my former life, and so it's always been important to me that my children can swim, that they're safe. They don't necessarily have to be, you know, Olympic swimmers or anything, or even compete at all. And in fact, neither of them have any interest in that whatsoever. And I was going to say, you know, much to my dismay, but I don't know if I am dismayed or not. I have mixed feelings about it. So I'm okay with that decision. That's obviously their decision. I'm not going to make them do anything they don't want to do. But what I do want to do is make sure that they are safe in water, that when we go on holiday, they can be in the pool and they're safe and they are really strong swimmers. This is especially important now that we're obviously moving to the beach. So, you know, they need to be safe in the sea and strong swimmers. So that was the deal. And, you know, as babies, they're never going to be like safe to like leave in a pool, but they can start to just enjoy being in water and be confident and happy around water. And I just wanted to start that as soon as possible. Plus, it's just cute, isn't it? It's just cute baby swimming. It was so fun. I have the best memories of taking my babies swimming. You know, literally after my 6-week checkup, I was straight in the pool with them every week, and it was just a lovely bonding time. You know, most of the time I would take them as my husband would be working because they're always during the day, the baby swimming classes. So I started taking my daughter like as soon as I'd had my 6-week checkup, and we were going to baby swimming every week, and I was just absolutely loving it. And I was telling my husband like how lovely it is and how beautiful and how well she's doing, and as soon as you know, have a day off or you're able to just come, you should come, you know, and watch. It's just so cute. So we'd been going to baby swimming for about 6 weeks, and Danny was finally able to make it. He was finally able to come to one of the baby swimming classes, and he was, you know, got to take all the photos and videos and just watch, and it was just so super cute. Anyway, we get out, we're in the car on the way home, and I'm like saying, you know, what did you think? Did you love it? Isn't it so cute? And he's like, yeah, sure. But you do know who the teacher is, right? I'm like, no, I don't know who she is. What do you mean? That's, you know, our baby swimming teacher. And he's like, yes, but you do know who that is, right? Tell me why. It was Claire. It was Claire. Our baby swimming teacher was Claire, his old neighbour, who he snogged drunkenly at the party and thought that they were in a relationship when we met. Had been my baby swimming teacher for 6 weeks, and I had no clue. I had no idea. I'd never twigged. So in my defence, I had never really, you know, known this girl very well. I'd seen her, like that first time we said hello was the only time I'd actually talked to her face to face. The rest of the time, I just sort of like maybe glimpsed her from afar or in her car. So I wasn't super familiar with her face. And then obviously this was like 4 years later, a whole lifetime later. I'd had a whole child by then. We'd got married. And you just don't expect to see your husband's ex-neighbour / snogging partner at baby swimming as the teacher. I just maybe was not prepared for that eventuality. Wrongly, it turns out. Now, I know what you're thinking. You probably have endless questions, and I agree, so do I. I want to know, did she know who I was? Because obviously Holdcroft is not a very common name, but I don't know if the teachers get given our second names. I don't know if it would have just said Charlotte and Aoife on, you know, the information sheet. I don't know if it would have said my last name on the actual teacher's list. I don't know if she might just have hoped it was a different Holdcroft. I don't know if I have no idea. I have no idea if she knew who I was until she saw Danny. Obviously she knew who he was when he came in that day and sat on poolside, and he was like, oh my God. And it's so funny because he like thought I knew that's who that was this whole time, but I clearly would have mentioned it, wouldn't I? I would have mentioned that. I was completely oblivious, and she was always very nice and kind and chatty. I never got the vibe that she didn't like me or anything like that. She was very nice, you know, she was lovely with my daughter, she was lovely with me, and I really liked her, and we got along really, really well. So I don't know if she knew or not, but I definitely didn't know until Danny let me know, which was rather awkward. So then I was left with a problem, because now she's obviously seen him. She now definitely knows who I am, and she probably knows that I now know who she is. So now we've got a problem. Do I go back to baby swimming? I didn't know what to do. I did go back, and let me tell you, she left. We had like a new teacher a few weeks later. I don't think she left straight away. I think she was there for like a couple more weeks, and then suddenly we had a new teacher. And I don't think she was still sad about it. I will be really honest. There's no way she did. I think she was also married and had children at this point. So I think she was fine. It could have just been coincidence that, you know, she was moving to a different pool or something, or a different time slot. Or it could have just been that she just felt that was really uncomfortable, and so she would rather have moved somewhere else because she didn't want to have to see my husband again, because obviously she was fine with me until she saw him. Perfect mascara all over my eye. So for lipstick, I'm definitely going with a Chanel Duo Tenue, because we're going for lunch, okay? We're talking 3 courses, we're talking champagne, we're talking coffee. So these are the only lipsticks known to man that will make it through that. I think I'm going to do Pink Nude. I think that's going to go nicely with this sort of bombshell, sultry look I'm going for. Why am I making such a mess of everything today? I think it's because I'm still half asleep. I came straight back from the school run and sat straight down to start filming. My eyes were still watering from bedtime. Maybe that was it. So for body stuff today, I'm going to use some of my Baccarat Rouge shimmering body oil, which I never use. This is so neglected by me, but I do want to use the perfume today because I just feel like an anniversary dinner. I feel like what I want is something like feminine and romantic, not necessarily super sexy given that it's lunch. I want something a bit more girly and feminine, but sweeter, a bit more innocent. So I'm going to put this body oil on my body, on my arms, on my legs, on my shoulder, the one shoulder that's popping out over here. And then I'm going to use the perfume today. Neck, ears, crooks, wrists. Never smush your wrists together, straight to jail. So for hair, all I'm going to do is brush it. But this is what it looks like the day after Dyson. Just really nice and like fluffy. It's got some body, it's got a bit of a like bend to it, but it's not necessarily like curly. Absolutely perfect. I actually prefer my like Dyson result the day after I've done it rather than on the day. It's just like more natural and pretty. And then all I'm going to do is put some Kerastase oil on the ends so it's not quite so fluffy from sleeping on it. It's a little bit fuzzy. But that's my story. That's my funny story that I like to tell about when we first got together and the pickles that we got into. I just find it, what a bizarre turn of events. Who could have, that could only happen to me, I feel like. I need you guys to tell me your stories. If you've got a similar story to this about how you bumped into an ex in an awkward place or anything like that, whether it's your ex or your partner's ex, I need to know, because I swear I'm the only person something this crazy could happen to, and this bizarre turn of events, mostly the fact that I had no idea that it was Claire. For 6 weeks, I took my baby swimming with that woman with no idea. She probably hated my guts and had to leave her job. But here we are. Here is the finished look for my anniversary dinner. I have to say, I'm loving this Hourglass palette. I wasn't sure that Soft Light would give me enough glow to be a highlighter, because I've really only ever had it or used it as like a finishing powder before, but it definitely does. It's just a gorgeous, glowy, understated highlighter. Really pretty, very bridal. Gorgeous. Not loving the middle part today. Maybe we'll do this instead. I know Gen Z are really against the side part, but I'm not in Gen Z, so I can do what I like. But I'm ready for some absolutely phenomenal Italian food. I can't wait. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video and I would love to see you in the next one. Otherwise, take care for now. Bye 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 bye.